It's going? Okay, there we go. On to plan B. And another kind of adventure with the internet and the pressing of the blue button. Yeah. And kind of remember when I was young, and went to go see this movie called the Matrix. I think most people have seen this movie now. And me and my friend were late for the movie, and it was kind of raining that day, and we got into this movie. And I remember, I think we came in after all the beginning part, and it was getting close to this part where Morpheus meets Neo, and he's like, okay, you've been looking for me all this time, now you found me. And I've got two pills. Blue pill, then you come with me and I'll show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. And so then he took the blue pill and had all these kind of adventures, Our blue pill is much less adventurous. Usually we press it and then, then get a low kind of internet connection. But anyways, things work out like this sometimes. Have these different pills and they're not always labeled. If you meet a guy in a huge trench coat, wearing really cool glasses, who always seems to be driving fancy cars, and he takes you to a mysterious underground hideaway and offers you a blue pill and a red pill, it's pretty obvious what the two colors are. Two colors of the pills. Still going? Yeah? Okay. So, then we're already attuned to look out for these pills, look for what's happening. It's pretty obvious something momentous is going to happen when a big guy in a trench coat comes like that, and then he offers you two pills. Okay, we tend to think, okay, the blue pill looks a little bit nicer, Let's not take the red one, it seems, a bit scary. But actually, there are people serving us up these different color pills all the time. There are situations in our life where we're presented with these kind of various pills all the time. Pills that we can eat that promise us various kinds of things. And actually going into subways these days, you often come across these ads. I try not to look at them, but every now and then you'll come across one. You're like, okay, that's a pretty good ad. It's kind of not bad. It's kind of ad, is offering something. Come to North Huron University, where it's all about the learning experience, not about the teachers, or not about just a degree, a piece of paper. You're going to get a really good learning experience, Or I often go on the downtown path in Toronto, and you'll see a lot of advertisements for financial things, like become a CPA, If you become a CPA, we're growing, we're going really fast, you become a CPA, you're going to have lots of good jobs. And they'll have advertisements for mutual funds. And all these things are various pills with various promises to them. You eat the CPA pill, and after that you eat the pill, you see how deep the CPA rabbit hole goes. You eat the mutual fund pill and take you on a little ride, see how deep the mutual fund pill goes. Eat the northwestern Hurontario pill and see how deep that goes. All these various things are promises. We have this opportunity before us that this thing is presenting us, and there's a chance that if we follow this thing, if we get on board with whatever we're offered, then it'll lead us to someplace good. Now, of course, this can sometimes be the case. It like with Morpheus in the Matrix, Neo took the pill, and he developed all these amazing superpowers, and he learned martial arts, and was doing a lot of karate, and at the end of the movie, he learned how to fly. So it was a really interesting pill. But there's also other pills that people can take. Actually, within that same movie, there was a fellow who didn't like the blue pill and wanted to betray all the people, and decided he wanted to go back to being deluded, wasn't too happy with it. And one of the trickiest things about this is that when we're offered these opportunities, offered these pills, we actually don't know much about where they're going to lead us. Don't know much about just where this opportunity is going to go. And so this is one of the interesting things. Actually, this plays out as monks a lot. As a monk, when you ordain as a monk, you have to go to a vihara or a monastery, and you have to kind of take dependence on a teacher. And this is one of the times when you take dependence on somebody that you basically depend on them to help you mold your perceptions, to help you kind of change your perceptions for the better, to help train you. So this is the interesting thing, that at the time when you're going to become a monk, you actually have the least knowledge about what all the various viharas are like, what all the various Buddhist traditions are like, what all the various teachers are like. And yet you know that there's this opportunity, and that the spot where you're in, you can't stay. Wherever it is you are, you don't want to stay there. You don't want to stay as a lay person, you want to become a monk. And so in other words, you have to choose between all these various colored pills. Okay, you got the pill that's one color in Thailand, you can go to these monasteries there. You've got the pills that are other colors here in Canada, maybe maple syrup colored, flavored. You've got the pills of the various monasteries in the United States. And when you take these pills, you jump in with both feet and see how deep the rabbit hole goes there. And the rabbit hole in this case lasts 4 or 5 years. Have to stay there for 5 years. And this is one of the interesting things about the way that opportunities present themselves to people in their life. You know, sometimes some of the trickiest opportunities to take, some of the ones that are most important to take, are ones precisely because we can't stay where we are. In other words, something has happened, we're in a situation where the things that we were doing before weren't working, and now we have to find a new way to go. But the situation being what it is, we actually don't know about the various outcomes, the various ways that we should travel, the various options that we should take. And this kind of thing happens to people often. Happens to people often when they're kind of choosing a partner sometimes, happens to people when they're choosing a university career, and it also happens to people at the various times in their life when they're not too sure how to advance, not too sure how to go forward. And so for all of these times, what the Buddha recommends, what we have from our practice, is that it takes a combination of two different faculties. One of them is the faculty of faith. In other words, we know we're looking for something. We know that whatever it is that we want to find, what we have isn't it. Where we are right now is not what we want. We want something we don't have right now. This is kind of what it was like for Neo in that movie. It's kind of meant to be a symbol of the spiritual quest. I don't know if everybody's seen that movie. I'm kind of going on about it, but who knows if they've seen it. But in this movie, this character knew he was looking for something, but didn't know what it was, and knew that he could not stay he was in this kind of 9-to-5 office job, and knew that he couldn't stay there. He wanted to find something else, but didn't know how to express it. And so then he came across this character, Morpheus, who then gave him this red and the blue pill. And of course, for us in our lives, it's often not this dramatic, that we meet a sinister, cloaked character, who offers us something. But sometimes people, especially in the West, today, when they come to meditation especially, they have a feeling that there's something that they want to change, but don't know quite how to articulate what it is that they want to change all the time. As something's missing. And what is it? And so when people have this kind of feeling, they set out on a kind of search, looking for some way to change this thing. And so, of course, when we know we're looking for something, whatever it is, we're looking to change our minds. The way that we're thinking isn't the way that we like. Our perceptions of the world may not be exactly the way that we like. And we're looking to change them. We know that the place where we're at right now isn't the best. It's okay, but maybe not the best. And we have to kind of try to find a way to change it. And so, of course, this does require an element of faith. The first part of the element of faith for overcoming any of these kind of ambiguous situations where one has to make a kind of change like this is that it requires faith that there's a solution. That's the first kind of thing that comes up with any type of problem one faces. One's in a situation, one doesn't know exactly how to go forward. Then one has to have this faith. Look, there's a solution to this. There's a way out of this. I remember when I was in Thailand one time, there was this one monk, he said, he was kind of very famed for his practice. And he said, one of the things he said, he's like, well, there's a solution to everything, basically. And you kind of think about it, at that time, all the people there are monks. So, we all basically believe that the Buddha found a way to end suffering. So you think, well, if there's a way to end suffering, then there's a solution to whatever the issue is that I'm facing. I may not know what the solution is, but the solution's there. The solution is there for me to find. It's there for me to explore. Now, the tricky thing about some of these kind of situations that one might find oneself in is that although one has faith that there's a solution, one doesn't know the ins and outs of the way to find that solution. One doesn't know exactly the road to travel to find that solution. And this is why it's this kind of quintessential thing with the spiritual quest. There's always this kind of time when a person has to make a leap. Doesn't mean make a leap to become a monk necessarily, but in whatever situation we're in, we have to leave our comfort zone and start striking out in new avenues, through new roads that we haven't explored before, through new pathways that we haven't seen before. And all this is sustained at the outset by this faith. Look, there's a solution to this. Whatever the difficulty is that I'm facing in my life, whatever the thing that I want to find, there's a way to find it. And so then the thing that one does when one strikes out on this is they come up with a kind of theory. Actually in science, I know they kind of, I was reading this book recently about the way that they conduct experiments in science. And what they tend to do is there's often this idea that people gather the data and then critically evaluate the data that they've objectively gathered and then think, okay, I'm coming up with this theory or hypothesis on this basis. But this scientist said, the way that scientists actually work is they have an idea about what they're looking for. And then they collect data to confirm or deny whether they found it. So in other words, it starts for them with this faith that, look, there's a way, there's this thing I'm trying to find. And so then it's the same when we're going along this kind of path. Whatever solution, whatever problem we're trying to solve, we have faith that there's a way to solve it, and then we strike out with various ways that we can to try to find a solution. Jumping into different things, taking different pills. And what this essentially means is that in doing this, we're going to run up against mistakes. It's kind of an inevitable thing. And then when one comes up against these kind of mistakes, whatever it is, striking out, trying to find the solution to this and that, then one gets a little bit more data. Kind of like the scientist. Kind of stashes it away. Is this the right path to go down or is it not? One of the tricky things about all these various things when we try to solve problems in this way is that some problems get solved when we keep going down a path despite difficulties, and some problems get worse when we keep going down a path despite the difficulties. So I remember I once had this kind of idea that the best way to overcome things was to kind of grip my teeth and go forward and just bear up with whatever difficulties. And what I really wanted to try to find at this time was a way to sit on the floor, kind of comfortably without injuring myself, or just sit on the floor comfortably. I saw these people sitting like this, and when I first came to meditate, my legs were kind of like way up here, and I was always in terrible pain when I was sitting. So I came up with this idea that, no matter what happens, I'll just sit through whatever pain comes up, and I'll just deal with it that way, And so I kept doing that for a couple years, and at first that seemed to work out, the pain would go away, and then I'd gain in flexibility, I'd be able to sit on the ground more, But then the day came when I kept doing that more and more, and I went to pick up this big computer monitor, and something in my back went blink, and I ended up with back problems for a year. I could barely sit on the floor for a year after that. That was thankfully in my 20s, so that problem healed. But it was a kind of object lesson. Look, there's things that go away when we keep doing them, despite the difficulties, and there's things that get worse when we do them despite the difficulties. So this is where the second element of problem solving comes in, whenever one has one of these things, and that element is wisdom. In other words, we have the faith that there's a solution to the problem, but all the time, faith is supervised by this wisdom. It's supervised by this faculty that watches, faculty that evaluates. Look, I've got this goal that I'm trying to achieve. The spot where I am right now is not where I want to be. I'm trying to get to this spot, and I'm striking out on this path. Is it turning out the way that I think? Is it happening the way that I think? And is it happening the way that I think? Not, or maybe it is happening the way that I think. Is this going in the right direction, or is it not? When one evaluates these things all the time, one starts to build a pattern of data in one's mind. And kind of these scientists collect a lot of data about things, and as they build this collection of data, they build hypothesis on what it means, and gradually they get this picture of the world that emerges. This picture of world that emerges through observation, through testing, through experimentation. And the same thing happens in our practice. We learn to set out to try to solve the various problems that we have. The various mental difficulties. Basically, these are the things that people come to meditate. We are trying to learn to be happy. And we strike out to try to overcome whatever negative habits we have. Is this the right way or not? At first, it starts with faith. Look, there is a way to overcome this. I remember talking to somebody one time, and I was saying, well, we were talking about the Buddhist path, and this fellow was a Buddhist. And I said to him, well, yeah, when you become a non-returner, you eliminate hatred. And he'd been trained in some other tradition. He said, it's not possible to eliminate hatred. And so if you think it's not possible, you won't find the solution to that. But then when a person strikes out to do this, they keep thinking this is a possibility. No matter how difficult it seems, they try different things. They build up this body of data. And this body of data about practice is where we get all these various meditation techniques from that these teachers teach us. Actually, the one that we do in this class comes from a monk named Ajahn Lee. And he actually developed this meditation technique when he had a heart attack in the jungle in Thailand. And he had no way to get out of the jungle. And the tribe in the jungle, they only offered him bamboo shoots. It was a kind of hill tribe. And bamboo shoots in traditional Thai medicine are supposed to be the worst, worst thing for the heart. It's kind of like the worst food you can eat. So he was just stuck there. And he had no option but to try to find a solution to his problem or to pass away. And so from that, he learned to manipulate the breath energies in his body. And this is where he came up with this kind of technique that we do now, that we kind of use as our basis now. In other words, he gathered this data. He had faith there was a solution. And at the end of that rains retreat, he walked out of the jungle, despite having a heart attack. He kind of walked out. So when one builds up these kind of things in this way, through faith that there's a solution to the various difficulties in one's life, through striking out, jumping in with both feet, this seems like the right pill. Let me taste it. Let me see where to go down this rabbit hole. One starts to gather a body of data. And when one gathers this body of data, then that's when the Buddha's teachings start to become one's own. One doesn't need the text. This is data that comes from a person's own experience. And the interesting thing about this kind of data, one thinks that, like when we think of data, it's like a sheet of paper, like, all these ones and zeros. But when one gathers this data from one's personal experience, it actually doesn't lead to more thinking necessarily. It leads to intuition. That's actually where we get most of our intuitions from. It's from all this large body of experience. And then when a person goes into a situation, they can quickly recognize whether this is the right way to go or not, whether this is the correct path to go or not. So I think I told that story a few meditation classes ago about that kind of that Greek statue that got sold to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And they showed it to these different people, and it looked perfect. All the features of it were perfect. It was called a kouros. And they have these different, there's many of them that got buried near Athens, And so they sold one to this Metropolitan Museum of Art. And many of the experts who looked at it said, yeah, this looks good. And then one expert looked at it, and she couldn't figure out why, but she's like, look, I hope this person, didn't pay them their money already, something like that. And they didn't know why, But they'd looked at so many statues before and evaluated so many statues immediately, something occurred to them, something's wrong here. You know? Later on, when they evaluated it, they realized that the statue wasn't dirty. It was perfectly clean, although its features were all right. And so that statue turned out to be a fraud. And so in the same way, when we basically set out in our meditation practice, set out to try to cure the various difficulties that we have in our minds, the various difficulties that we have in our life, we gain this data through wisdom. Yeah? And the interesting thing about this data is that it leads back to intuition. You know? And so in this way, all the different parts of the parts of the Buddhist path start to integrate with each other. Faith integrates with wisdom, wisdom integrates with intuition. And what we get then is a faster and more skillful understanding of how to direct our mind in various situations, how to train our mind in various situations. And it's in this way that we learn to become our own teacher. We learn to become somebody who's teaching themselves in the various situations they encounter and eventually can stand on their own feet. You know? So this is actually what a good teacher wants for us. When a person's a parent, they don't want to have to teach their kid to walk for its whole life. They want to show this kid the ropes, you know, actually show it how to do these various things. They're there to protect it at first. They're there to show it things at first. But eventually that kid learns to stand up and walk around. And through trial and error, it gains an intuitive understanding. Until at age 10, age 20, 30, 40, walking around is no problem. Have an intuitive understanding of how to walk, even in all kinds of slippery conditions. And in the same way, when we train ourselves in this way, whatever the difficulty we have in our life, we assume that there's a solution to it. We assume that through the practice of the Dhamma, we can overcome any mental difficulty. And we set out to try various ways to do this. We set out to put forth effort to try various ways to overcome whatever the difficulty is that we face. Some of them may be right, some of them may be wrong. But we gather data. We learn which ones were right. We learn which ones were wrong. And the nice thing about gathering data in this way is that it leads to an intuition. We don't have to keep remaking the same mistakes. In other words, when we encounter the same thing again, encounter different mind states again, we gain a quicker apprehension of how to deal with them, a quicker apprehension of how to direct our mind. And in this way, the practice proceeds. And our practice proceeds through faith, through wisdom, through intuition, to the real elimination of defilements, to the real elimination of suffering in our life, so that we can gradually learn to stand on our own feet and become our own teacher, move forward this way in the Buddha's teaching.